Guys, welcome to the Pure Progress Lifestyle, where the only thing that matters is progress. Guys, today I'm joined by Manuel. That's how Die.
Die. You got
Oh,
it. Hey, that's
Manuel.
totally cool.
Manuel.
Nice,
Got it.
Brad.
You're an award-winning digital thought leader, keynote speaker, author, and you used to be a CEO of multi-million dollar retail brand. I see. And also what you do now is you're a sought after performance coach, and you've been dating your wife for 21 years, as you always like to say. Did I miss any?
23 now. I got to update that
23.
line. We're in year 23 now. Year 23. Yeah.
23.
Yeah.
Okay.
Crazy.
What's
Yeah.
I've that's a big subject that, we could
Mm,
just go off right there is dating,
sure.
because
Yeah.
I look across the board, everywhere. Everybody, especially every man, is struggling with
Mm,
relationships, just to
yeah.
how to really connect. What's one thing that you found that is really make you able to connect with your wife?
You know, it's making or taking the time. Right. Because I mean, we all talk about time and this idea of time management, right? And
Right.
trying to balance out everything, to make lifestyle and work, so we hear the work-life balance, right?
Yep.
And I gotta be fair, I used to be searching for all that, okay, like everybody else out there. But I'm like, how do you make this fit together better? And it got to a point, and this is, probably over 10 years ago, where just recognize that if my wife and I weren't intentionally making or taking the time from our weeks, like every week, weeks just pass by. Those turn into months, turn into quarters, turn into years, where you may have the best of intentions to follow through, to make that time to connect. And I mean, really connect, without the distractions, without the devices, without the commitment and having to be somewhere else. But I mean, just to make space for one another to have a conversation,
Mm,
because you think about when you first meet your partner, that life partner, and you mean at that moment when you first meet, it might be like a lightning bolt. And it's like, oh, I'm going to be with this person the rest of my life. I just know it, and maybe it's not always so clear, but regardless, there's an attraction there. And there's a desire to want to learn about that person, to find out what makes them tick, to also develop, hopefully, some intimacy, to let them in on maybe things that nobody else in your life knows about. And
mm,
there's that deepness of trust and understanding, which is just amazing when you're that connected to somebody. And I got to say, I've been with my wife, 23 years.
mhm.
23 years. I can tell you straight up, Brett, the guy I was 23 years ago and the guy I am today, extremely different,
Right. For sure.
as is my wife. And if we didn't have that intentional time to continuously date one another, that didn't stop when we got married. You know what I mean? And continuously date, making that time to have those conversations, to do the introspective, to talk about your dreams, your visions, your aspirations, what makes you feel fulfilled. What are your beliefs around your kids if you have kids, and because we have that non-negotiable spot once a week,
Mm,
and this is going on over 10 years now. This is a non-negotiable with us. It's blocked out on our calendar every Saturday night from 5 to 10 or 11.
mhm.
It's that 5 to 6 hour block. It's not prescribed. And what I mean by that, we're not there saying we have to do this at this time and this at this time and this at this time. It's just a block of time where we know we're together, no other interruptions. It's just us hanging out.
And I,
And we can do all sorts of stuff, man. Like, don't be so prescriptive that if all of a sudden it doesn't go to plan, that you decide not to do it, because
right.
that's what happens to a lot of people, especially in the fitness industry, right? It's like, well, if I can't get to the gym 5 days a week, what's the point? Like how many times you hear that, right? And
Yep.
so very similarly with relationships, it's a slippery slope when we stop prioritizing that
Mm,
other person in our life. And so, yeah, because our relationship was very, very strained, going back about 15 years. And we were looking at one of two options, it was like, do we stay together and work through this? Or do we start talking about how we can co-parent our kids and literally be separate for the rest of our lives,
mhm.
and this was one aspect that really saved our relationship, if I'm perfectly honest,
Really,
so that's sort of that idea around that,
what made you like come up with that? Like Saturday nights,
my
5 hours.
wife. Okay, it's my wife, straight up.
Okay.
She's the
Okay.
hero. Okay, I'm the zero, or the guy that just sort of shows up. And to be fair, she was the one that really brought that forward, and she was also the one that would encourage us to read certain books. And I got to a place too where the idea of us not being together was far scarier than the idea of me figuring out ways to understand my vulnerability, to be able to open up, to be able to connect with her in a different way,
Mhm.
a way that she felt connected with, not just me and, how I was raised, the typical men around me at the time. Vulnerability was seen as a weakness, right? Like, you
Yes.
don't open up, you don't talk about how you're feeling, you don't express those emotions. Like, the only emotions I ever expressed was, anger,
Right.
right? That was easy because I saw that
Mhm.
modeled around me a lot,
Mhm.
especially with my mentors.
Mhm.
Um, but but also, on top of that, it was either that direction or nothing,
Right.
So it was like one or all or nothing when it came to, you can express anger, but any of those other emotions, no. Be stoic, be cool, right? And so yeah, there was all those sort of complications, and we could tell that the path that we were going down wasn't a good one. And we made some changes. And just again, it started as just a 1 weeknight a week. It's not a
That's it.
lot. It's not much,
Mhm.
and it very quickly made such a good difference in our lives that we just said, we'll just maintain this commitment no matter what,
Now, do you guys have
and
like
yeah.
rules with that parameter? Like no phones, no,
Uh,
like
at
completely present?
times, I'll be honest, Brett. At times, we'll encourage no devices, or we might have it to capture video or photos. But we're very good at, okay, we get to the restaurant, let's put the phones away.
Mhm.
We'll sit here, we'll connect, we'll chat. Unless there's a conversation and there's something that we're discussing, like maybe we're talking about a trip that we're planning.
Right.
In that case, we might open up our phones, but it's with the intention of doing some research, confirming dates, commitments. It's not really to just browse aimlessly or to look at what's happening on Facebook or Instagram, right? So
Mhm.
um, we're not so prescriptive to say no devices, because sometimes, I'll be honest, it's we order an Uber Eats and we Netflix and chill, and that's all good. And then we have to do rock paper scissors, who gets to watch which movie first, so she
Yeah.
loves her rom-coms, not so much.
Yeah.
And but again, it's compromise, recognizing that she's going to get hers today and I'll get mine next time, but we make the space for each of us to have the things that we like, and we support that.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think
Yeah.
vulnerability, especially for men,
Mm.
stems like the men are so scared to be vulnerable because they're scared to be rejected?
In the scope of relationships, absolutely. That's
Mm.
one of the fears, for sure,
Mhm.
is that fear of rejection. I mean, it's intimidating, it's hard. We put ourselves on a limb to say, hey, I like you.
Mhm.
Could we maybe connect one-on-one to get to know each other? Like that's ultimately what we're saying when we want that first coffee, maybe a movie, take someone to dinner. It's like we're expressing our desire to get more emotionally and
Right.
intimately connected with that person. And so that is being vulnerable. Okay. And if all of a sudden that person is very negative or very quick to say hell no, that is very hard to take, especially for our egos, especially
Mm.
if we've grown up trying to protect our ego and our
Right.
self-image or our self-perspective, and because a lot of those things perpetuate from early on in life, and it perpetuates every 10-20 years. You get some new iteration of that into your life, for the most part, if as long as you've been living and growing and working on yourself. That personal development piece you talked about right off the get-go, the reason debt for your podcast, if you will, that idea of supporting people with change, but
Mhm.
intentional change that develops us as human beings, right? But you have to be able to recognize what are the aspects of ourselves individually that are holding us back from realizing or actualizing that better version of us that we see in our head, that we believe we're moving towards. And I think vulnerability or lack thereof is a big part of what can sometimes limit our growth
Yeah,
personally, you know?
for
Yeah.
sure. Now, with change, like you've noticed that you
Mm.
had to make a change with that.
Yeah.
Also, what about your career? Because that one,
Mm.
I feel like most people get so stuck, and it's not just about finances, it's about
Yeah.
living. They're not living.
Yes.
What
Oh,
what
man.
about your career made you make a
Mm.
change?
Well, it was the personal changes I went through, and just sort of bring back to a bit of an anecdote here. As a teenager, I was morbidly obese, and I won't get into too much of the details because tend to talk about that quite often on other shows. And so it's very much public domain. Okay. It's out there. If people want to find out more about my backstory, definitely. But let me just give you the synopsis. From age 9 to 15, I ate my emotions.
Mm-hmm.
I learned that if I did certain activities like watch movies, play video games, it made me feel good in the moment. Also made me be able to just have this sort of, it helped me exclude everything going on around me. I
Right.
became very present to just that activity. You get that dopamine reinforcement, right? A little bit of serotonin,
Oh
feel a
yeah.
bit relaxed at the same time as connected. You feel good. And so
Mm-hmm.
I recognized doing that habit made me feel good. Didn't matter how hard life was and how emotionally challenging it was. I had my video games and movies.
Mm-hmm.
But also on top of that, because we got to eat, I recognized if I eat certain things, man, it made me feel good in the moment.
Yeah.
Not long term, but in the moment. And
Right.
that was not me saying, Brett, can you pass me some more salad plates? Like
Right.
it was very nutrition poor and yet calorie high.
Mm-hmm.
And so by 15, I got to a place where I was very, very depressed, dealing with a lot of social anxiety and all the other usual negative stigmas that come with that state of unhealth. And, I had a realization where I became very, very, very afraid of the idea of not changing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I got afraid thinking, oh man, am I that naive to think I'm just going to stay like this forever? Because the last 5 years, I didn't stay in any one shape. I just kept getting bigger. And I started to have that realization that if I don't make some changes, I'm only going to get worse.
Right.
Things won't be as good as they are right now at 15. And they didn't feel very good. So I'm like, oh man, this sucks. Like maybe I should do something. But I was
Yeah.
afraid of that too, Brett. I was totally terrified of the idea of having to change all my habits, figure out a way to get healthy because I didn't know what that meant.
Mm-hmm.
But when we look at what's more intimidating, the idea of going down a path, getting more overweight, more depressed, more anxious, more withdrawn from my life, or is it more fearful to think, oh, okay, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I want to make a change? That seems less intimidating to me than the other. And
Mm-hmm.
so usually at that moment's when we're ready to make a change. And so I did. And it took 20 months to release all the weight, 6 years to put it on, 20 months to take it off. What I learned though in that period, because I was still coping with a lot of the negative emotions and psychology of being morbidly obese as a teenager that was ridiculed and bullied and, all that stuff that comes with that, rejected by girls, like just, I could give you a laundry list of things that beat me up. But,
Mm-hmm.
Moving into my early adulthood, I traded the food for alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
I just went from one coping mechanism to the other. But meanwhile, from the outside looking in, I looked a lot fitter, a lot healthier, a lot more confident, but I was like faking it.
Yeah.
And alcohol gave me that ability to, what I believe, to connect with people.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that the people that would invite me to come be social with them was wanting that version of me, not the sober version of me, who was quiet, withdrawn, constantly doubting himself. I knew that that's not who they were inviting to the party. They were inviting the guy that I am when I have 2 or 3 drinks and then
Right.
some, right?
Right.
And so all of a sudden you talk about ego, you talk about how do you perceive yourself? All of a sudden I believe that version of me was the one everybody wanted to hang out with. It
Mm-hmm.
was the preferred version. And so that became a dominant personality for me, if you will, for the next 15 years from 17 to 32. And then
Mm.
at 32, man, it just, things do catch up to you.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
things caught up. And life got really hard, where
Mm.
my wife was talking about what life would look like to divorce and
Mm.
co-parent our kids, because the environment that I was creating based on me drinking as frequently as I wasn't an environment she wanted to raise our girls in, which is completely fair.
Mm-hmm.
Even though at the time I was like, what, you be,
Right.
like, just, that's not cool. Like, no, hey, I work so hard to provide for the family. So again, I work really hard. I party hard.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to be present for my family. I had all these things I was juggling. And I realized that this alcohol thing was a bigger problem than I was willing to admit.
Mm-hmm.
And, one night or morning, I should say, because I came home completely obliterated. I have no idea how I got home. But I made it home, and the next morning, almost noon, I'm finally waking up, picking myself up off the berber carpet because I couldn't even make it to our bed that night. It's more of a comedy of errors than anything. But I can laugh about it now, 15 years removed, right, from that
Right.
incident. But
Absolutely.
I'll tell you, it was something I didn't share openly for many, many years. However, I think it's important to let people know. I did a TED Talk speaking to this event specifically, and then what pursued afterwards, like what followed the event. And long and short of it, right? And for those listening, my wife asked me a question while we were discussing what life would look like for us to co-parent our kids separately.
Mm-hmm.
And she asked me this question, and this is the question which ultimately, and I'm going to get to your answer on the professional side of things, but this was really important to provide contextually of why I made such a career shift a few years after this incident. Was she asked me, are you being the type of man that you would want to marry your daughters?
Mm. Mm. Yeah.
Dude, yeah, I know it's kind of a pun, but it was a very sobering question in that moment, so much so that it was just like, man. And I felt angry. I felt pissed off at her. I felt undermined. I felt cornered. I can tell you all these emotions I was experiencing when she asked that question. But at the same time, as I was feeling really rather antagonistic about the whole thing, I also had this part of me that was like, well, no, I'm not being that guy. Just being honest with myself. I'm not being that guy. As much as I say I'm being that guy and I try to act like being that guy, inevitably I do all these things that undermine that value and perceived value, like completely undo any of the good that I do because I have this recurring drinking, and using it as an excuse. Oh, I need this to chill out. I need this to connect with people, just any excuse I had, to justify my action. And after she asked me that question, I got really honest. And I realized I wasn't being that guy, and I wanted to be that guy. I always said I wanted to be that guy. And I believe that's who I was, even though I wasn't always showing up as him. But that set in motion a 1 year of removing alcohol. So I literally went cold turkey. I said, okay, well, I'm not going to drink for a year and see what happens. Just so I can focus on family, focus on me, focus on my relationships, but more importantly, work on myself. Because up to that point, Brett, all I did was professional development, personal development. I'm like, what's that? No, I just want to develop myself professionally because it was all about the ego, right?
Right.
I want to make more money. I want to be recognized more. I want to be the dude, right? I want to grow my company. I want to be a better leader. All these wonderful things. But when it came to me developing as a man, as a father, as a husband, as a son, as a community leader, I didn't really have a lot of focus on that or intentional time set aside for that.
That's huge.
Like, yeah, I mean, it's scary, but because I realized, holy smokes, I have no idea what to do. Like it was sort of like at 15-year-old boy again, right? Looking in the mirror, like, oh my God, I'm huge. I didn't know this is how bad it was. I want to make some changes, but I have no idea how to do it. Well, here I was at 32, feeling the same way again, but now with respects to alcohol. And 6 weeks into that journey of no alcohol for the year, I realized, holy smokes, this is going to be way harder than I thought it was, and that's when I finally got vulnerable with my wife, like truly vulnerable. I let her in on how I was feeling, what was going on in my head, what that little voice between our ears, how it goes from a whisper to literally holding a megaphone and speaking and yelling to us about all the negatives, right? Like it's easy to be negative on ourselves. Like, wow. Because all of a sudden I took away the alcohol. So I took away all the dampers.
Right.
It was like loud and clear. Man, this is how I feel about myself. This is awful. And meanwhile, on the outside looking in, everybody thought, oh man, your family, you look beautiful. It looks like you got everything together, very successful. Da, da, da. And it was the opposite. On the inside, that was not it. I was so far removed from that, and that's when I found help. I literally found a psychologist I worked with for about 6 months, a relationships counselor for my wife and I to work on our communications and connection. And I just went all in on that personal development, that introspective work.
What are some of those things? Because we've all I've had many people on, the show that quit drinking. Yeah. I've quit drinking myself.
Nice.
But what's one of the things that, okay, we stopped drinking. What's one of the things that you can personally develop yourself on? That's not business, making money, just you as a human being.
Powerful. Great question. And when I think back to it and sort of the path I've been on now for 15 years, as a result of that one question my wife asked me, like I have to note that was sort of that turning point for me in my life, that
Mhm.
very clear milestone where my direction shifted. And because it was only a few years after that I decided I wanted to leave a 17-year career, and shortly after that, my wife left hers and then pulled the kids out of school, went traveling for 5 years, and we can get to that when we get to it. But, in that moment, I got to say, like, the exercises that were most helpful was even just talking to somebody
Mm.
that had no biases, no preconceived notion of who I am or what I'm about. And it was very refreshing to have that person that I didn't have to fear any judgment from.
Mhm.
There was no connection other than here's a doctor I'm agreeing to go see weekly for the next, like, I don't know, 4 to 6 months to talk this stuff through, stuff that I've avoided talking about my entire life, getting honest with my emotions and my self-perception and some of the things I do to tarnish that, and that in itself was completely cathartic. Like I felt better every time I'd go and meet him. I'd feel better leaving there. I felt a little bit lighter, like I was carrying less of a load. And more importantly, I felt less alone.
Mm.
And I also started reading books, books that were more in the personal development, sort of genre, if you will. And one book, and I mean, they do also play into the professional development side, but they have a really heavy personal slant, like meaning that the content that you're learning, if you shift filters, it's like, wow, this can help me in real life. You know what I mean? Like in my everyday life, not working. One book in particular, Gay Hendricks, called The Big Leap. That was one book. The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy, The Five Love Languages.
Really?
Um,
I've heard the five love
yeah,
languages
yeah,
very much.
huge.
Oh, really?
It helped my wife
Okay.
and I a lot too.
No
Helped
kidding.
me. It also helped me as a leader for my
Really?
organization at the time. Yeah, because we all have certain ways that we feel supported or feel loved.
Mhm.
And I'm not talking just, I'm referring to also platonic love, not just that romantic, intimate love, right? Like
Right.
the feeling love, feeling appreciated, feeling supported is another sort of, it's in the same vertical of love, right? And um, the five love languages, once you understand sort of what are your dominant or primary or secondary love languages, you can then set forward with some intentions to support people or give them the love they want to receive it. So
I
as an
see.
example, my wife is acts of kindness, or sorry, acts of service,
Mhm.
meaning that if I do things around the house without her prompting, without her having to say anything, like I just do stuff around our house, right? I tidy up, I clean up, I might take out the garbage, I'll wash the linens, like just do these things. And when she sees me do those things, she just feels really, really supported,
Mhm.
very loved, and her demeanor reflects that. Like it's just like, wow, this is like porn for housewives, like just full on, man. I get in there, I do some cleaning, and wow, she's really digging that, and then for me on the opposite side, my primary languages are words of affirmation. So yes, I like to be acknowledged. I get a lot of value when I hear people comment that, hey, what you helped me with really made a difference. That makes me feel really good. That's why my entire adult life, I've always been doing things that helps others because I love that. I love how it makes me feel, but I also love it when they acknowledge, like, wow, you really helped me.
Mhm.
Like selfishly, that's where I get fulfillment from.
Yeah.
But that's one of my languages is words of affirmation. And once you understand what your love languages are, you'll start to say, wow, that makes a lot of sense.
Mm.
Like because a lot of our motivations are directed towards that emotional response that we get from doing the thing, you
Mm.
know? And so that was a really a wonderful book for us, and we reread it almost annually. All as well, it's the book that we've given away the most amount of copies to other couples. Like
Really?
it's yeah. So I highly recommend it. It's a short read, and even if you're just curious, go to their website fivelovelanguages.com. They have free quizzes on there, which will help you figure out what your languages are. And then if you want to go deeper, yeah, they have courses, all that stuff. But even just doing the quiz is a wonderful way just to start the process of understanding what might make you feel more appreciated or loved,
Mm, no
Yeah.
kidding. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've had, a girl that's turned me on to that before.
Yeah.
The five love languages.
Yes.
And I've taken the test and I've, because she was like, you don't like to be touched all that much. And I'm like,
I,
it's
I'm
not
the
that I
same
don't
way.
like to be touched. It's I anybody, because there's always the honeymoon phase. People,
Yeah.
everybody's all lovey-dovey and touchy for sure. But I like
Yeah.
to see what their real intentions are, not just, for to me, but who you are as a person. That's what
Yeah.
I look for.
Oof. And I admire that, right? And I think it's important to recognize that there's so many layers to people, right? It's just
Yes.
how we are. And you're right. In those early stages, there's a lot of endorphins firing, and there's a lot of that physical attraction. I mean, we've got a millennia of DNA that says, "Hey, procreate, procreate, keep this
Right.
human genome going forward," right? Like, so, hey, man, that instinct is alive and real in all of us. It's not going anywhere. But we have also evolved into much more stoic and yet sentient beings, right? Like we have an emotional side, we have a logical side. And I
Mhm.
think most of the challenges is because we're constantly playing tennis between the both sides. One's playing an A game, the other one's playing a B game at times. So it's like, okay, different levels, right? But that's why we develop ourselves to try to level those out. And for me, some other exercises that were really helpful was I read a book, and I recommend this to everybody and anybody that will listen to me, but this is one book that made a huge difference in the last 10 years, and it's by a gentleman by the name of Dr. Viktor Frankl. And the
Yes,
book
I've
is
heard.
Man's Search for Meaning. Yeah, you've probably heard of it. And
Oh yeah.
Man's Search for Meaning. And the first half of the book is it's an eye opener. It's not an easy read. He accounts about what he experienced as a persecuted Jewish person during the Second World War. He was also a German Jew, right? So
Mhm.
we can imagine, like, heavily prosecuted. He was sent off along with all the people that he ever cared about, sent off to concentration camps. But he was a psychologist. And so he had this interesting way of sort of just observing and taking things in and just observing people and the guards and just really trying to better understand why are
Mhm.
people acting the way they are and doing the things that they're doing. Even sometimes it made no sense, right? Like, I mean, war doesn't make sense. But it was just eloquent how he put it all together. And then the second half of the book, he shares what is now regularly known as logotherapy. And it's this idea of aligning our purpose and our vision, and more importantly, to help us get more meaning for our own lives. Because the more clear we are on that, it's a lot easier to take decisive action and start setting out in a certain direction with our lives if we feel confident that that's the direction we're meant to be going.
Mm.
But finding that clarity is not simple. It's a
Mhm.
process, right? And so he sort of outlines some exercises and processes to start to adopt that.
Mhm.
But that clarity, anyway, start working towards it. And it is readily used now, logotherapy, in many common practices,
Really
especially
cool.
in psychology and psychiatry. And I highly recommend people take a look into it. My psychologist at the time was utilizing logotherapy as well to help me, get more clear with who I am, why I am, why
Really.
am I motivated to do certain things? Having a better understanding of that. Because as soon as you understand that, then you can start to be mindful and aware of, oh, you know what I'm doing right now? That is emotion. I'm trying to stroke my ego right now. I'm
Yeah.
searching for a compliment right now.
Yeah.
I'm aware of it. I
Yeah.
can see myself doing it. I'm like, why am I doing that? Like, that makes no
Mhm.
sense. Like, and again, you just start to become more aware of how you yourself as an individual, a human being, operates.
Yeah. Now, can't
Yeah.
you use that to like your advantage too? Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to perform this much better just to get that outcome. And so you'll put yourself in places where you can let that just shine, good or bad.
Yes.
You just let it is what is, just go.
Well said. And it's true. You're spot on. Like, I think there's a lot of benefits that come with it, but I do have to admit too, it can be very hard at times as well,
Yeah.
and discouraging, because sometimes we start to revisit dreams or aspirations that we may have had, and we start to realize, man, I'm way off from those things that I used to think I was working towards. So, it's not a matter of beating yourself up or feeling any guilt or shame or blame around that stuff, but it can be hard to acknowledge. It's like, yeah,
Yeah,
you know, like I know, like I look at back then my financial situation, you know, I was making lots of money. My company was very profitable, but my outgoing versus the incoming, and also some of my investment choices that I made, I wasn't very smart, you know? And so, you know, going through all that work, why was I making certain decisions? I think a lot of it was based on my ego, not based on me aligning with what really values in my life. Like, what are my true values, right? Um, and so you start to see how that lack of clarity influences some of the decisions and actions that we make, you
for
know,
sure.
and it's not always good. Okay. Like, it's like, oh man, I keep submarining myself, right? Sabotaging myself. And that's why Gay Hendricks' book, The Big Leap's really good. It talks about limiting beliefs. It talks about how we have these glass ceilings, or these ceilings that we put over ourselves and say, well, I can't, you know, we get fixed in our way of thinking, and we like, I can't do that. You know, I know that's just something I'll never be able to do. And it's like, well, why? Like, why is it something that you can't do? Right. But yet we'll create these little rules, and our subconscious will do whatever it can to prove them to be true. So if you think, you know, me as that 15-year-old boy, you know, that was morbidly obese, I mean, I thought I was a loser. I thought nobody liked me. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I had all these beliefs about who I was and my lack of value, and every opportunity to prove that to be true, I took. You know,
Mm,
if someone was negative to me at school, I'm like, there it is. I knew it. I knew I was worthless. I knew I wasn't somebody that people liked.
mm,
You know, that because that person just, you know, ridiculed me or made fun of me, or I saw them whispering at the locker, you know, with his buddy. And I'm sure he was talking about me. Most of the time they weren't even talking about me. You know, they're in their own worlds, but that's just where I was.
mm-hmm.
Right. And I know many people can probably relate to this, you know, that sort of side note, this story, if you will. And because we all experience this in other ways. And it's not easy, right? It's just not. But the cool part is you don't have to be alone.
Mm,
You might be on your own, but you don't have to be alone. And that's the advantage of having access to communities all around the world, literally through our phones. You
mm,
know, so connecting with like-minded people that might be trying to make similar changes. It's wonderful when you find a community that you feel like you belong to. I'm not
yeah.
talking just joining, right? I mean, you can join any community, any group, but do you feel like you belong there? Because when you find the one that you belong to, it's amazing how energizing and confidence building that can be. You know, because Brett, if you think about it, and for those that are listening, watching this, like, think about this in your own life. What happens when you're not clear on what you're doing or why you're doing it? Like, when you don't have clarity, what happens?
You're
You
not
know,
enthusiastic about it.
correct. As well as if you don't know which directions, you know, like, just say it this way, like you're setting out on a massive journey, right? You're going to drive to another city in another state, but it's a state and a city you've never been to. Well, what are you going to do?
When you're gonna get lost and you're gonna stop and you're like, yeah, this is not such a good idea. I'm going back. I'll stick with the comfort.
Exactly. No, you're spot on, right? Like, it's lack of clarity, which in that situation would also be lack of direction, right? Like, you have zero confidence that you might be doing the right thing for the right
Mm,
reasons to produce the right results. Because if you're not clear on those steps, it's really hard to take the steps to take action. And so
mm,
what ends up happening as a result of that lack of clarity and confidence is we start to procrastinate more. We put
mm.
off doing the things that we said, this is really important to me, but I have no idea how to get started. I don't really know how I would keep it going. Why would I bother? And well, you know what? I'll come back to this later. I'll go watch some Netflix right now, or I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to go look at job postings on LinkedIn. Like, we can find other things to do other than the thing that we know, if we do that one thing, it's actually going to bring us closer to the result that we want.
Mm.
And so this lack of clarity breeds lack of confidence, which in turn creates less action, more procrastination. So in reverse order, right? Like, I mean, or on the opposite side, if you want to improve your confidence to take very specific, decisive action that you feel good will take you at least directionally closer towards what you want in life or professionally, you're going to need clarity.
Yeah.
So how do you create clarity? Well, I always say some of the best ways to create clarity is just have a good question that you
Mm,
can start to look for the answer, right? And
mm.
so similar to the powerful questions that you ask on your podcast, Brett, like those are great questions that can produce a lot of clarity for people. right? And one of my favorites is like, you know, can I do this? So this where this is whatever the change is, because usually everything implies a change, right? Like changing our situation, changing our profession, changing our relationship status. I mean, it's change that we are looking to make. And if we think about that and we ask ourselves the very first question is like, can I change? Can I do this? Like as a 15-year-old morbidly obese teenager, I was like, can I actually get healthy? Because if I could, wouldn't I have done it already? Like, you know what I mean? It's like, but no, and as I start to work through that, it really, it shines a light on knowledge.
Yes.
And our lack of, right?
Yes, for sure.
And
It's almost
mentorship.
like
And
every time you ask a question, it doesn't matter, like you just said, like, I'm fat right now. Am I able to do this right now? To get, and it's amazing how once you just ask that question, it's almost like the universe will give you that answer. It may not be like right there,
yes,
but you'll continue to ask that question until you get the answers you're seeking. It's a phenomenal
well
process.
said. Well said, and you're absolutely right. So that first question I like to encourage people to ask is, can I do this?
Mm,
Because you have to get to a place to say, yeah, okay, I think I can make the change. I'm
mm,
not saying you know all the steps yet. It just has to be, can you make the change? Can you start the process? And riffing on sort of what you say, it's progression that we're looking for, not perfection.
mm,
Perfection is going to be the thing that you'll never achieve. So don't start looking for it, but progress is accessible to any one of us at any given time,
mm.
because all it means is we're doing an action that we weren't doing before that's taking us closer to the result that we want.
Right.
It's like someone putting on the running shoes, stepping out the door with the intention to go for a brisk walk. That is intention in action, right? And that is going to bring you one workout closer to achieving that health result that you want. And
Mm.
don't think about all the other steps that have to happen out of that. Just worry about the first step to get you there. As they say, showing up, man, is half the battle, right?
Yes.
And so after you've got that first question, can I do this? And you get to yeah, hell yeah, I can do this. Great. Now you got to go to question 2. If I do this, will it actually work? Because
Mm.
I mean, how many of us see that, like the diet culture? And I don't get me started on Brett. I won't talk about diet culture, but this whole idea that we look at the word diet and it is synonymous with weight loss. Well, that's completely erroneous, right? The word diet just means, how do we nourish ourselves? How do we fuel ourselves? How do we keep things progressing down that path, metabolically speaking, right?
Mm.
It doesn't mean weight loss. And yet we look at diet culture and it often is interpreted that way. And here's the thing. Okay, well, if that's how it's interpreted, we look at people that try weight loss plans and they, I don't remember what the statistics are, but I know it's a really scary number. The amount of
I
diets,
think it's
weight loss.
95%.
Is that what it is? Okay, that's
Yeah,
crazy, right? It's
yeah.
crazy. So you got all these people that try things, they get a little bit of results, and then they stop doing the thing, and they either regress back to where they were, but usually never back to where they were, but usually worse.
Mm.
And if that is your normal way of dealing with diets, that's your normal. If I was to ask you, hey, ask yourself, if you do this, will it work? You're gonna be like, wow, I thought it worked before, but it never seems to work. I keep going back to where I was. Why am I
Mm.
doing this? And it's really hard to progress past that step because we believe that whatever we try, we're going to fail at anyway. So why bother?
Ooh, I love
Right?
that.
Right? Like, because
Yeah,
we see that. Like I told you earlier, remember the guys that like I used to be that guy. That's why I make fun of it. But well, if I can't get to the gym 5 days a week, I don't think it's any point in me doing it.
yeah.
I just don't think I'm going to get the results that I used to. Right?
No kidding. That is, that's so fascinating that you just say that just about diet, but that's with the whole business self-development
Everything.
culture as well.
Yeah,
It's like
exactly.
I'm not achieving, the results that 1% is doing. So why do I even bother getting up day after day and doing it?
Well said. And
Mm.
that is the gist of it for many, many, many of us. We get to that place. So it's like we just don't have that clarity, nor do we have the belief in ourselves.
Mhm.
And this is why question 3 is so critical, because you have to get to, first of all, okay, can I get healthy, or can I do this thing? Can I get a new career, as an example, right? Okay, yeah, I can. I might need to level up my education, learn some new skills. Maybe I got to go back to school to learn specifically a new trade, but I can learn. I've
Mhm.
learned before. I think I can learn again. So this is, again, it identifies growth mindset tendencies versus fixed tendencies, right? And so now you lean into question two. Okay, well, if I actually go and do this now, do that work, will it produce the result I want? Okay,
Mm.
well, there's other people that have done this kind of a thing and they're out there getting the results. So maybe it'll work for me too. Like for me, it was again, I didn't have the luxury of online resources when I made my big physical change. Because again, it's sort of late 80s. We don't have the internet like we do today. I told my kids, I went to the library, I got books out on fitness and shit. My kids, they still, a bunch of smart asses. They're like, oh, Dad, why don't you just Google it? I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
older than Google. And they go like, oh, like TV too? And I'm like, what the hell are you guys talking about? No, I'm not older than the TVs. Anyways, it's kids, very funny.
Mhm.
But I had to go to the library to get books out to educate myself. And the cool thing was, in a lot of those books, in some of the magazines I picked up, they had examples of other people that had gone through similar changes, people that were very overweight that were now healthy. And I was like, well, if they can do it, I think I can do it too.
Mm.
So my confidence was built because now I saw a process. They in some of these books, they give you a full fitness program or they give you a full nutrition plan. I'm like, well, that person followed this plan and got that result. Well, I just got to follow that plan and maybe I'll get that result too. And inevitably, you start making changes that way. You start to see progress right away. Right away.
Mm.
Like I tell everybody, after your first workout, sure, it's going to be hard, but it won't be hard? Feeling amazing that you finished a workout.
Mhm.
Like that is way better than the idea of regretting that you didn't go to the gym, especially when you made a commitment to go and you promised yourself you'd go and then you lied to yourself, you broke a promise to yourself, you didn't go. Now you regret that decision and action. That
Mm.
doesn't feel very good, does it? No, it
Right.
doesn't. Okay, what are we going to do about that? Well, I'm
Right.
going to go to the gym now. Okay,
Right.
great. Message me when you've done that. But I'll just skip to question three because then I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. But so you got question one and two. Now we get to question three. Is it worth it?
Mm.
And is it worth it? Like if I talk to teams and like larger communities and that, I can use the term it. But when we're talking to man, like you and I right now, or you're talking to some of your listeners, it's like, hey, am I worth it?
Mhm.
Am I worth the change? That was where I was stuck the most in my life at various periods because my self reflection, I didn't like who I saw when I looked in the mirror. I
Mhm.
didn't really like myself. And if I couldn't like myself, how could I expect anybody else to like me? And so I would feel that there was very little value that I had to offer. And as a result, that question, am I worth it? I'd often think, no, I'm not worth the change because, just what's the point? Right.
Right.
Like it's hard to be there. And that's why I always say it's okay if you feel that way, because the best thing that you can do if you feel that way, this is where you go out and you find a community, you find a coach, you find a mentor, you find a parent, a teacher, somebody that loves you and wants to support you through the change. And if you find a community like that, man, it's a lot easier to stay connected and focused and doing the right things because you're side by side with somebody else that's going through the same hardship, wanting to achieve the same results. And now you've got that accountability and support.
Mhm.
And it's unbiased. It's not like these people have a deep history and awareness of who you were and what brought you to that moment to join that community or group or professional. It's simply, this is where I'm at. This is where I want to go. And I'm struggle with a lot of the steps in between. Oh, don't worry, me too. Why don't we do this together?
Mm. Mm.
Boom. It's awesome, right? Like it makes it seem much more accessible and within reach. And,
Mm.
and that's what we're looking, because if you don't have the confidence initially, you got to do something that allows you to feel a bit of the progress, a bit of the support, and ultimately a bit of the good stuff that comes by doing the right things for the right reasons at the right time.
Mhm.
And so those are sort of the three questions that I feel for anybody and everyone. Like if there's anything to take away from our conversation today, Brett, hopefully those three questions will be
Yes.
ingrained in their mind. And anytime they feel like there's a time for a change, they go through that quick inventory of answering those three questions.
Yeah. Can you repeat those three questions
Yeah.
real quick
Yeah.
before I give my feedback on the last
So
one?
think about the change, right? Like if you're looking to make a change, so just start by asking yourself, can I do this? Can I do the
Mhm.
change?
Yep.
If I do the change, will it actually work? Meaning, like, will it create the results that I want? And then lastly, is it worth it? am I worth the change? And if those, there could be a part three, like part two of question three. So we'll call it 3B. It's like, who do I need to get around to support me with the change?
Mm,
Because
mm,
especially if we're not feeling very confident about ourselves, especially after question three, that idea of value and how we see ourselves as being valuable or not. That's where an unbiased community of like-minded people that are positive, okay, you don't get a bunch of dumper days or downer debbies, like you want to get around positive people,
mm.
right? There's enough negative in the world. Just pull up any news channel and you can get your fill of negative when you want it, but look for other means to just fill your life with positive, because positive in, trust me, will lead to positive out. We're talking scientific method here, really fancy stuff, right?
Yeah.
We look at the inputs, we look at the outputs. If the
Mm,
outputs aren't happening what we want, maybe we have to change the inputs.
mm.
Simple, right?
Yes.
Like I'm I know there's probably some scientists and doctors like, that's not quite it. I'm like, I get it, but I'm just using this as an example. Like, if you don't like what results you're getting, you should probably look at the steps that brought you to those results anyways.
Right. Right.
Chances are there's something there that can be improved on.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, it's all down to self-awareness, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. I think, one big thing that people always ask is, how do I get more self-aware? How do I get more self-aware?
Mm.
One thing that's helped me, that I find
Mm-hmm.
will help everybody, start by reading, because
Mm.
it's like you
Mm.
just said,
Yeah.
input, positive input gets, positive output.
Yes.
So if you start reading, then you can start saying, oh, wow, I do this, this, and this. And then once you start asking your question, because all self-awareness is just pretty much
Mm.
the ability to ask yourself questions,
That's
and then
so well said.
analyze what you're doing. Be more objective of your own actions. Once
Yes.
you start reading, you slowly start to build that process in your mind.
And even listen to a great podcast like yours, right? Like, I mean, there's other ways of getting that input as well. And because I do recognize that from time to time I get clients that they don't enjoy reading, and I get it, no problem. Okay, well, every time I read, I feel like I'm going to fall asleep. I'm like, okay. Have you tried audiobooks? Have
Mm,
you
yes.
tried listening to a podcast, watching TED Talks?
Mm,
Like, there's so many other ways to reinforce positive messages in, right? And it's just a matter of not being so prescriptive that you aren't flexible enough to try multiple things.
right.
Like, don't skip that daily input of knowledge or inspiration and education, right? Just because you don't have access to a book.
Right.
Like, that's what I'm trying to say. It's like, okay, I forgot my book at home. What? You're gonna stop learning today? Like,
There's so many
no.
you could find on the internet,
Yeah. Yes.
without a doubt. So
Yeah.
at what point,
Mhm.
well, actually, let me give you my feedback on that,
Yeah. Sure.
on the third question. Is it worth it? Am I worth it?
Mm.
I think one thing that a lot of us are not aware of is a deep, if you strip everything away, just by asking that question yourself, you realize that there is self-love that you have there, because you don't want the
Mm.
worst for yourself. So when you
Right.
ask that question, is it worth it? Well, what else am I going to do? Do I go to this job that I can't stand? Do I continue
Mm.
this life that I can't stand? Is it worth it? To put in a little bit of grit, a little bit of work, no matter how long it takes?
Yes.
Absolutely, it is. And then from there, like, am I worth it? Yeah. Used to,
Mm.
like, yeah, I'm worth it, because I don't want bad things for myself.
Yeah.
And from there, it's just, like, you that feel good endorphins start to come into your brain, and then positive action flows.
And you're spot on, and the biggest thing is too is, as we start to have some of the positive results, it's not a matter of coasting now, it's a matter of doing more of what's working. And I
Mm,
think that's sometimes the part that maybe it's not so much forget, but I think we just presume that now that it's in motion, it should just stay in motion. And it's not the case, right? Like we recognize that motivation is a depleting resource. Every day we wake up and the gas tank's full of motivation, but maybe by noon, maybe by mid-afternoon, maybe by the evening, that tank's going to be dry.
Mm,
You're not going to have much more motivation left. And we also have to recognize, depending on the tasks and how challenging it is to do the task or follow it through, the more of a drain it may require on your motivation.
mm,
As an example, maybe I've got to drive through the Rockies, right? Well, I can tell you, I can have a full gas tank at the start, and I'm going to get so much fuel on the basic highway drive. But now I get start going through the mountains, twists, turns, huge climbs. Woo, I'm burning fuel at a much quicker rate.
right.
And same applies to motivation. When we're doing certain things in a day that are really, really hard, requiring a lot of brain and physical, like just it takes a lot of resources to complete it. It's going to zap way more of our motivation. So, there's a wonderful book called Eat the Frog. Okay.
Oh, I gotta
Yeah.
check. I've been wanting to check. I've
Good.
read like
So,
everything by Brian Tracy except for
oh,
that.
I love it. So you'll enjoy this read. It's a really quick one, but his whole principle is eat the frog, which basically means if the hardest thing that you had to do in a day was to eat a frog, do it first thing, get it
Mm,
done, because
mm,
the rest of the day will not be as challenging as that first thing that you accomplished. But also he recognizes that with the psychology of it all, like we have the most opportunity to complete something that requires a lot of resources when we have all the resources at hand, right? And otherwise we will procrastinate, we'll put things off, be like,
mm,
maybe not today, maybe I'll come back to that tomorrow.
right.
And we all know where that goes, right?
Oh,
We just
without a doubt.
tomorrow. And
More
so
things were lost on tomorrow.
yes, that's right. And so that's sort of what I would like to encourage people is just recognize, don't beat yourself up about it. Just recognize you only have so much motivation. And if some of the big changes that you're going through are going to require way more motivation to get through, best to prioritize those earlier in the day rather than
Mm,
later in the day. And that's why, I have some people and I'm like, they'll tell me I'm not a morning person. I don't like working out in the morning. I'm like, well, how badly do you want the change? Do you truly believe you're not a morning person? It's just because you haven't acted like a morning person, right? Like, I know you can say I'm not, that's very definitive, right? That's very fixed. I'm like, why don't you just put the word yet on the end of that? I'm not a morning person yet. Oh, good.
mm.
I like that. So that means there's an opportunity to maybe get to be a morning person. What do you think? Yeah, I guess so. Great. Let's just start with that, and that word yet is very powerful, right? Like just you throw that on the end of a fixed statement, something that's very limiting or even sometimes maybe negative, like I can't do X yet, right?
Mhm.
And we start to speak that to ourselves, even when we find ourselves saying, I can't, I won't, I don't yet.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I like that.
yeah,
I like that. Even, you mess up in the moment. It's like, okay,
yeah.
I'm not that person yet. It's always
That's
like
right.
faith, faith.
That's right. Hope, faith. It's also just acknowledging that you are self-compassionate. You recognize, okay, it was a good try. I'm not quite there yet,
Yeah,
but I'm going to keep going, you
yeah,
know?
for
And,
sure.
and, and so that self-compassion is really important. It is, because
Mm,
there's going to be days where things don't go to plan. I mean, and it's probably actually going to be more days not going to plan than days that go to plan. Just being honest. That's just life, it just happens.
yeah,
But it doesn't mean you give up. It doesn't mean you
right.
stop doing the things that create the positive result that you want. It just might mean that you got to give yourself a bit more compassion and recognize there's going to be down days. So you got to work on that resiliency to pull you out of the down days.
Yeah,
So what might have been a down week is now only down day. What used to
right,
be a down day is only a down hour.
right.
Like don't. It's constantly recognizing that there's always room for improvement,
Mm,
and being embracing that journey, or really that positive mindset around that journey will help so much, especially on
mm,
the days that are hard.
mm. At what point did you realize that, like, hey, I don't need anything? Because, like, I can clearly see it. You're highly charismatic, you're energetic, enthusiastic, and
Thank you.
very enthusiastic about the stuff that you talk about.
Mm-hmm.
At what point were you like, wow, all those limiting beliefs are not me anymore? Like, this is who I am.
Well, I guess here's the thing, right? They're still there, but they're not controlling me anymore. They're not the dominating one. And I can also be really quick to say, is that idea I just had about myself true? Like I'm not morbidly obese anymore. I'm not that kid anymore. I'm 30 years removed from that time in my life, right?
Mhm.
Like, and yet when I'm down energetically, emotionally, maybe psychologically or spiritually, like feeling down, feeling drained, it's amazing how negatives can creep in. And I think we're all naturally that way. Like when we're feeling down, it's easy to invite more down, you
Right.
know? And I think it's just recognizing the humanity and the emotions that are me. I'm not trying to avoid them anymore. I recognize they're there. And I'm trying to be more emotionally accessible. I think is probably the best way to sort of phrase this. So the last 15 years has been a lot of that, trying to be more in tune with my emotions and recognize it. Doesn't mean I give in to them, but I can recognize them when they're happening. I can recognize when I'm feeling overwhelmed, because that is a triggering part for my social anxiety. When I start to feel overwhelmed or like I don't have enough time to get something done, I start to feel anxious. And that anxiety can
Mm,
be very crippling for me,
mm,
and again, I've learned to manage it really, really well, but it never goes away entirely, and that's what I mean by that resiliency to work through the things that are hard and recognize, what, I'm human and I'm going to have good days. I'm going to have some not so good days, but that's okay.
right.
It's okay, and because I also take time to reflect on what I'm grateful for in my life. And
Mhm.
I think that is the little missing ingredient that needs to be brought to the forefront for everybody to understand is when you're having those down days, it's a perfect time to start to really get awareness around what you're grateful for having in your life.
Mm,
The people, the places, the things, the experiences, the things that make you uniquely you. And be grateful for those uniqueness qualities because it's what makes you one of a
mm,
kind, and yet we still get to embrace this life of ours and learn new things, connect with new people, like there's much to be grateful for. So even when we're having those down moments, it's like, as down as it is, well, yeah, it could be worse. Sure, it could always
right.
be worse, but rather than going that direction, I'd rather keep it more focused on the positive and just recognize, listen, man, I know you're having a really crappy day today. Your
Mm,
wheel blew out and you just found out at work they're downsizing, so you're getting a 3-month buyout. I mean, that's hard. I know it's a life transition you weren't anticipating, but hey, what is it that you're grateful for? I mean, you're gonna get 3 months off. I know you've been talking about wanting to paint the house or have an adventure with your kids. I mean, do you think you can do that for the next 3 months while you're looking for a new gig? Oh yeah, I think I could. Awesome. Be
mm,
grateful you have that opportunity. It wasn't just boom, they're closing out of business. Now you got nothing.
right,
Like,
right,
again, I don't like always going to like let's paint a worse scenario so you
right.
can feel grateful that at least that didn't happen. I'd rather just look at what's really present in your life and get grateful for that.
So would you
There's been
say on
studies. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Go
on
ahead. What was
would
that?
you say on your down days, your
Mhm.
five, I know you talk about your five F's, your five values come into play, what you're grateful for on those values the most?
Well, I can tell you right now, when I'm not honoring my 5 values,
Mm,
it creates more space for the negative to work its way in.
really?
And what I mean by that is it's usually because I'm not doing the things that make me feel connected to my life and those that are in my life. Like
Mm,
family is one of my values, right? And
mm,
so creating space for me and family to have experiences, just connect with each other, is important to me. And it's important to my family because when we're all feeling connected and supported by one another, it doesn't matter what happens in our professional lives because we know that we've got each other. We got that space. We know that, oh yeah, we got the Sunday brunch coming up. We're all going to get to hang out and see each other, like, and so it's a matter of prioritizing commitments, prioritizing not blocks of time necessarily, but how I'm committing to utilize my time to connect with my family. And when I look at my calendar on a week-to-week basis, I like to color coordinate these little blocks of time.
okay.
So as an example, family is always pink. I have 2 daughters, my wife, so you can understand why I use pink. A lot of women in my life. So I use pink to signify family commitments. When I look on my week-to-week schedules, if I don't see a good amount of pink in there, I know that if I don't make some changes, A few weeks from now, I'm going to feel really disconnected. I'm going to start to feel really poor about myself as a result, because I'm not having that connection with family. Because I think it's very good when we're talking about taking an inventory and getting aware of things, if we can put things into a more tangible way to do that, it makes the adoption easier. So I use time blocking on my Google Calendar, and I use color for different types of commitments. So when I look on my week to week, month to month, even when I do my annual review at end of year, I can see how much time was allocated to each of my values: fitness, faith, family, finances, and fun. Right. And finances just means any way that I spend or earn money. So it's that financial aspect of what makes us who we are. I do think that's important for everyone to acknowledge. We live in a world economy. You need to make money to do things, to support things. And so it's not something to be shied away from, but it is something to be prioritized. Not saying necessarily it's a value for everyone, but it should be an aspect of your life and something to be cautious of, or at least aware of. And family, of course, fitness is anything that's health orientated. And that also, I factor in nutrition under fitness. And then family is friends and family, any of those sort of closer connections. Faith, obviously, is how am I making an impact? I mean, some people are more denominational, so they might be referring to a deity or a god of some sort. Fair enough. That's for them, their faith belief. For me, it's more so this idea of leaving this planet better than it was when I got here. It's that sense of purpose and fulfillment that comes from making an impact with this time that I have here. And for me, that's what faith means. So it's non-denominational, but yet at the same time, that probably applies to every denomination. Like it's generic and yet specific enough to be clear enough that I think everyone can relate to that. And again, those are just for me. I like the alliteration. It's the author and speaker in me. Okay, so that's why I use 5S to help me remember it, but also it's easier for people to connect with that. But because those are my 5 doesn't mean it has to be your 5.
Right.
But I encourage people, figure out what are the 5 main values that you would never negotiate on.
5 non-negotiable values. Love that.
Yeah. Because once you're clear on those, Brett, I think you'll agree, once you're really, really clear on that and you lean into that and you start to prioritize commitments around those, you're going to start to feel better because you're honoring yourself and the things that you value most in life. This feeling of I'm wasting time or I'm missing out on things. Like, listen, if you're aligned with your values, it's awesome. It's absolutely fantastic, and I can speak very clearly on this because there's been periods in my life where I've not been aligned with my values. And every time in that period, no, good things didn't happen, man. If anything, it was really hard and I wasn't very good at navigating the hard, and I feel confident in the conversations I've had with others that this is a very similar experience that many of us have when we're not doing the things that matter to us.
Yeah, without a doubt. I know if I'm behind on my work or, I've slacked off or whatever, because I have a daughter myself, like I know, like I am not full. She's not getting the presence that she needs from me. So it's something I always have to be aware. It's one of the reasons why I have to wake up early. It's because if I can put that time in, get her other things done by the time she gets out of school, our days are fun. Like it's great. I'm there, like everything. The biggest thing is I'm more patient. I have way more patience for the things that go wrong. And so, I mean, if I don't get those done, like I know it's not, I'm not putting my best self forward.
That's very wise. But it's also, it's awesome that you've recognized that about yourself, right? Like, and that's exactly a wonderful example of what I'm trying to explain right now is just this, when you're aligned with those things, you create more space for good stuff to happen. And I know that seems kind of generic, almost watered down, and sure, take it as it is. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't try it or aspire to that. Or why don't you just set out and prove me wrong, prove Brett wrong, say, oh, I was doing all that and man, life just, didn't get better. Okay, well, we'll deal with that if that's the case. But I know I've helped thousands upon thousands of people with my book and the 5S and this understanding around whole life fitness, and because I believe that we can become fitter in every aspect of our lives, right? Psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, not just the physical. We can see improvements, and when we apply fitness to our health, good things happen.
Mm,
Well, can you be financially fit, right? Can you be psychologically fit, emotionally fit, spiritually fit, or fitter? Yeah, of course. The answer is yes. We can all improve, you
mm,
know? And I can honestly say anybody that sets forward with an intention to see themselves get better in certain areas, if they do the work, they're going to see improvements. That's just the bottom line. And I'm not here to quantify and say, you're going to see, 1,000% improvement. No, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to be a digital marketer. Let's talk about 10xing your blah, blah, blah. No, like just constant measurable improvement. A little bit every day is all you need.
Is that where
Just
your
celebrate the
2%?
little bit of improvement, just a little bit, just celebrate that. Don't worry about the big, complete 180 shifts or transformations like that. That just comes as a byproduct of doing the right things.
Right.
Celebrate the fact that you're doing the right things, you know?
Mm, celebrate the fact that you're doing the right things. Now, is this where like 2%, your when you
Yeah.
talk about
Yeah.
2% improvement?
Yeah. The 2% solution was I recognize that a lot of people had a challenge with just time and how they see time in their life. A lot of people, one of my top excuses I've heard, being in the fitness industry for 30 years, I don't have time. I don't have time. I don't have time. Like I can't even
Right.
tell you how many times I've heard that. All
I
right.
think
And
that's like the top excuse
easy,
on
easy,
everything, on everything.
easy. And I catch myself saying it too. Like I'm not immune to this by
Right.
any means. Um, so if that's the case, well, what is that sort of minimum effective dose that we need daily to really see improvements physically, mentally, and emotionally?
Mm,
And what I found was after working with lots of people, like for years and years and years, it got it down to this idea of just 2% of every 24 hours. 2%. I know there's people listening right now. They're like, okay, I'm trying to do that math. What is that? It's okay. It's 30 minutes a day. All right. 2% of 24 hours is just 30 minutes, not very much. And I always tell people, pull out your smartphone, go to screen. It's what do they call it? Screen time. And it will give you your daily, weekly, monthly amount of use on your phone.
mm,
What apps you're on most, what kind of things you're doing most. Some people still aren't aware that that's a function on the phones now, but I encourage people go and look at it. This is not to shame you, okay? This is not to make you feel bad, but you should know how much of your time every day is going to your phone.
right.
Because when I invite people to prioritize 2% of every 24 hours, 30 minutes for themselves, for their physical, mental, and emotional person, I don't want to hear the excuse you have no time. Because I know if you looked at your phone, you've got plenty of it, and I'm asking you to recommit how you're using some of that to see improvement in life,
Mm,
because being on Facebook for an extra half hour a day is not going to make your life better. And I know
mm,
there's some people I'm like, it's not true. I'm like, it's true. Okay. It's true. Otherwise we would be on Facebook all day long. We never get off of it,
yeah,
but we don't.
right.
It's social media. We use it for quick connections. Fair enough. But if you're wasting a lot of that time and you're feeling negative about your current situation, what if you just took half of that time and reapplied it to making some positive change for yourself?
Mm,
Inevitably, you're going to see some great growth and you're going to start to feel better. And so the 2% a day, I've gotten prescriptive with it just to get, because there's so many people are like, well, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do it. And sometimes I don't know why I should even commit to doing this. I'm like, hey, no worries. I'm going to help you with all that. But if you can trust and set aside 2% of every 24 hours for 28 days straight, this is how you're going to get the best results.
mm,
15 minutes of movement with purpose, just body weight based calisthenic exercises, all scalable. Doesn't matter what your ranges of motion are, any injuries, every movement's scalable because they're just real life movements, and we're putting our body through these different positions for 15 minutes, getting a good workout. And at the end of that workout, 5 minutes of mindful meditation. And then the last 10 minutes is focused, intentional personal development. You
mm,
got to feed the mind, right? Something.
Mm.
Something. If you want to grow that seed, you got to water it, man. You know, you got to put some fertilizer on it. You got to tend to it. And the same applies to our minds and that version of us that's connected with that mental version, you know. And so I encourage them, listen to a podcast like yours, Brett, watch a TED talk, listen to an audiobook, read a book, connect with a mentor. I mean, I'm not going to tell you you got to do this every day, but just 10 minutes of focused intentions around improving yourself. You
Mm.
know, feed that input into your mind. And if you do this for 30 days, the compounding effect is beautiful.
I
You
love
know, at
that.
the end of 28 days, you'll see huge improvements in all areas. And inevitably, your confidence and clarity are going to go up. So you're going to start taking more and more decisive action.
Mm.
And that's a beautiful thing, because then you all of a sudden results start to happen even more quickly.
Mm. And then the
And it's
questions.
a wonderful thing. I've seen this happen again and again. And again, is 2% all you need? No, no, but it's the minimum that you deserve. You know, like if you're just starting out, start with that. Can you set aside 2% of every 24 hours? I've never had anybody say, no, I can't do that. And I'm like, because if you can't, I'm like, well, you can't help yourself. And they're like,
Right.
what do you mean? They were expecting me to say, well, I can't help you. And I'm like, no, you can't help yourself.
Hmm.
It's not me. I'm here ready to help, but you can't help yourself. Like,
Right.
don't look at me for the answers. Like, you have the answers, and you're just not willing to follow through on them. You know,
Yeah.
people don't like it when I say that, but I'm like, it's okay. It's going to hit an emotional chord because you know I'm right.
Right. Exactly.
You
Yeah.
know, and it's like,
Yeah.
so what are you going to do about it, right?
Yeah.
and
I mean, that's easy.
and
It's so easy. Just that's as simple as just putting in an audiobook, going for a
mm,
30-minute walk. It's so simple. I love that.
yes, yes,
So, so I got two questions for you. It might
sure,
be a little
yeah,
bit subjective, but that's okay.
that's all good.
What what's the biggest impact from all of this you've seen on your daughters? How they are as people?
You know, they're I think that's just it. We've seen them. They're amazing human beings. You know, like they're kind, they're thoughtful, they're attentive, but they also have a lot of confidence in themselves. So much so that
Mm,
they try new things.
mm,
You know, there's none of those limiting beliefs like I can't do that, I can't do that. It's like no, I can try, because
mm-hmm,
that's how my wife and I have been. It's just like you're gonna try everything, and don't worry, we're not looking for perfect. We're just looking to have an experience.
mm,
And that's been our big focus is we collect experiences as a family, not stuff. We collect
mm,
experiences and connections and all those beautiful things that make life what it is. Awesome. And so that's been wonderful to see, and a lot of that just came through osmosis, them just being around us doing certain things, because we all learn through two methods: modeling and mentorship. Right,
mm,
we model what we see other people doing, and then we also have people that mentor us to do certain things by giving us certain feedback, maybe showing us a different way of doing it that might be more efficient. But when you think about your own life and how you've learned, modeling and mentorship were two key components. And based on how we've been mentoring our kids, as well as what we've modeled for them, they've just sucked it all up,
mm,
and they're just wonderful human beings. And they have their days, just like I have my days, and my wife has her days, but we're not afraid to not talk about it, when we feel it's appropriate and we want that family help. And I think that's been a really wonderful thing to see, because they didn't follow my suit, because it took me a long time to sort of work through that vulnerability piece of being able to open up.
right.
And again, I don't open up with just anybody and everybody. I don't feel that's deserving, because it requires a lot of trust,
Mm,
but I can get there with anybody. Do you know what
right.
I mean? Like that's the difference. Again, I don't like people to think that I'm saying be vulnerable for the sake of being vulnerable. That's not the case here. I'm like, it's just another skill that's going to allow you to deepen connection and understanding with a fellow human being or group or community. Like it's a wonderful human skill to
Right.
develop.
Right.
And that's what I want to encourage people to start to experience, is developing very intentionally that skill of being more vulnerable.
Mm. Now,
Yeah.
do you think they're like more
Mm.
decisive in the things that they do now? Like all the plans?
Oh yeah. Oh man. My
Yeah.
my eldest decided to get into acting, and she moved to
The phone
oh
dropped.
Oh, sounded like the ceiling was coming through.
No, the
it
phone dropped.
is.
Not my.
No, dude, it's totally cool. And so with my kids, like I've noticed that like their confidence about themselves, like they are more forgiving when they make mistakes,
Mm,
but they still have that self-critique, in them. And trying to nurture them to not be so self-critical. That's been a struggle
mm,
because I know it's a struggle for me, myself personally. So, whatever we struggle with, it's often something that's hard to also encourage others to do. It just is. Like if I was really out of shape, really overweight, I wouldn't be able to show up and honestly with myself to invite people to try new strategies to be healthier themselves.
right.
And I think it's important to feel aligned with who we are and who we believe we are. There's believing, and then there's actually showing up. And the smaller the gap, the more integral and the more authentic we tend to feel about ourselves, good things happen. And so
Mm,
I think it's trying to encourage them to just be the best version of themselves, that they can be.
mhm.
And I know it sounds like a cliche because it is, but cliches are often founded in truth. Like it makes a lot of sense when you hear it, right? And
Yeah.
so that's been some of the things that we've really noticed, and just seeing that confidence in them. They're both off at university now, and they're really becoming their own independent humans, and they're doing great. And that makes my wife and I very, very proud, very happy.
Mm. How hard is it to say goodbye?
Oh,
Even though like they may not be far, but
yeah,
it's like,
they're far enough that we can't see them every day, and but they're close enough that we can see them,
yeah.
because they're still within our province here in Western Canada. But there involves travel to get to see them, right? And but uh, we're my wife and I are still processing this sort of empty nest phase that we're going. Well, actually, we're not going into it. We are in it now,
Right.
like, and it's just getting used to that, right? Like we're both home. Like I work from home. She'll get home after work, and it's quiet. We don't
Mhm.
have kids running around. We don't have the girls talking to their friends on phones, or Bree with her girlfriends over after school, or her boyfriend and her hanging out. Like it's not there right now. So it's yeah, it's been challenging.
Yeah, it's almost like it's
Um,
too quiet. Too quiet.
yeah, yeah, it feels that way at times. But it's okay because I know this is just part of life and it's meant to happen, and we're happy for it. And so we find ourselves now, getting really good with scheduling every opportunity when, Thanksgiving's coming up, and then we got Christmas, and she's gonna have reading break. Like, so we're already trying to plan for some events, so it gives us things to look forward to. But we also have started to enforce every Sunday we get on a family Zoom call. So
Right.
we all at least get to connect every Sunday, early evening, just to get some FaceTime with each other,
Mm,
and that's been really helpful,
mm.
if I'm honest. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't think of a better thing as a parent, even though, it can hurt
Mm.
when your kids just don't need you as much as they did. And it's okay, you've like
Yeah.
reached the scale of evolving here. Where it's like I'll still always have that no matter what, which is a good thing because you'll always be there no matter what.
True. True.
So my final question is this one always gets people when they always ask me, wait, how do you raise a girl, like, so well? And I always find it's like raising a daughter is almost like dating. It's- and I know you can laugh to this, with having girls of your own,
Yeah.
because it's like knowing that it's going to be, irrational emotions for, no real reason. Just how like they want to talk. She wants to talk so much, and just being
Yep.
able to actually listen and not try to solve her problems so much.
Yes.
And just being that emotional support, that rock, and knowing how to snap her out of the tough times and make things fun again.
Love that. And you're right. I think that's it's just holding that space for them to be them, to be vulnerable, to open up about what's challenging them. And at times they just want to open up to talk about it.
Hmm.
They aren't looking for a response or an answer, or even at times for us to help. You know, sometimes they just want to vent. They just want to get it off their chest because they know we're safe. And I think that's the real kicker, you know, do your kids feel safe around you? Do
Yeah.
they feel supported?
Yeah.
You know, do they feel loved?
Mm.
And because you do that, trust me, you're going to do okay. You know, and that's it. Like there's nothing fancier. There's no fancy answer or to-do list. It's just, you know, make them feel safe, make them feel supported, let them know that, you know, there's no judgment. They can have just a nice, safe place to share what they're feeling or what they're going through, you know, and if invited and they ask for feedback or support to work through it, they know that they have you to help them with it. You know, I recognize I had to just let them talk sometimes. And unless they specifically or directly asked me for support, I wouldn't offer it. You know, like I wouldn't just do it arbitrarily. Like, here, I'm going to just help you through this. Like, again, you know, or mansplain, right? Like,
Right.
I recognize it doesn't help.
Right.
And if anything, it makes them more frustrated.
Right.
And so, you know, trying to pull back. And my wife struggles with that too, you know, because she, you know, we're both in our 40s. We've lived a lot of life. We're guys. I know it's so funny, right? Because I'm like, I remember my parents saying this to me and me being like, whatever, dad, you know, whatever, mom. And
Right.
well, the roles are reversed. And I would totally understand, you know, because we've experienced a lot of what they're going through and what they're experiencing, negative or positive.
Right.
But they forget that we were too 20 years old once, you know, like, and so, yeah, it's just an interesting journey, but I love it. I love being a dad, you know, and it's just another stage of that evolution of being a dad, you know, it's now being a father of young adults. And I'm still trying to figure it out.
Always. It's like, you know, I've always tell people, once you got one thing figured out, another thing comes along.
You bet.
Awesome. All right, where can
Uh,
people find you at?
Oh, thanks, Brett. Yeah, you know, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram are the three platforms I'm most active on. The nice thing of having a unique name like Manuel, so it's DAI, it's my first name, Welsh for David, Di, and then last name is Manuel, 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 Portuguese last name. I know people are like, whoa, that's quite the mix. I'm like, yeah, I'm Canadian. Don't worry about it. Okay, so hopefully you caught the accent there. But listen, I'm easy to find if you can type my name in. Even if you misspell it, you'll probably find me because there's nobody else with my name, so they're just going to match you up with whatever's the closest. But I say, just reach out to me, shoot me a DM, send me a message, send me an email if you're on my website, and just say, hey, heard you and Brett talking, you know, this is a change I'm working through, or here's my thoughts on that. You know, like I just like connecting with people. So just please don't hesitate, reach out anytime.
And this is a beautiful thing. What's next for you?
You know, I've got some keynotes. I just got back from a weekend away. I did a keynote for the YWCAs of the Okanagan. So that's like up north here. There's a series of facilities. And so I did their opening keynote for their conference, which was a lot of fun. Got to connect with really cool people. And I've got another one next month, and I've got a new website as well as a community membership site launching as well. So those are sort of the big things on my plate right now, and a couple of startups I'm a partner of. So yeah, we'll sort of see where all that stuff goes. But all of a sudden I find that I've got more time right now because the kids aren't around. So I'm like taking on a few extra projects, and then just I train a fair bit, you know, not a ton, but I'm still competing in CrossFit, and now as a masters athlete, of course. But I really enjoy that, and so that's pretty much me for the next foreseeable future. But who knows? Who knows what will happen next? You know.
Beautiful. Love it. Well, thanks for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
Brett, thank you, man. A great conversation, wonderful platform. And thank you for creating this space for us to have these conversations and for you to capture them and share them. Really, it's amazing to see this. The world needs more of it. And so thanks for being a great model. You know, someone's modeling and also mentoring others. And so thank you for that. I really appreciate it. It's been a great time today.
Thank you. Thanks for coming on. Guys, you know where to find them. Go check them out. Thanks.